This is Third Paradigm, and I'm Teresa Coraggio. Today, the boys who would play God are allowing us to have a blue sky, and I'm celebrating by making an episode about mysticism and economics. This was inspired because Mark Alexander, who does the Ministry of Truthiness, posted on his Substack How to Dismantle an Empire and said, "Stop reading right now and go get this book." So since then, T. Jacobson posted on Notes, already have it, and then also Helene Belloni is reading it and posting great responses, and Peter has said that he's reading it, and then another Peter Bregan, has told me that I'm a good writer and that I'm actually funny. So, with those commendations, how could I not talk about this book? Talking about mysticism and economics seems like a throwback to Sacred Economics by Charles Eisenstein. And indeed, Charles and I have much in common, both on the spiritual side, as I explored in The Space Between Stories, and also on the economic side. It also harkens back to Rudolf Steiner, who wrote The Karma of Untruthfulness, which I'm now reading, and he was part of the Anthroposophical Society. So this is a group of people who both had a particular idea about what the reality of the world was, and also what the reality in the world was. So those two parts that I'm calling socio-spirituality. I think this combination is one that we should be leaning into, and having a community around that's doing the same, I think, is a very powerful thing. When I had another episode I was listening to recently, I quoted a poem I'd written a while ago that was called Current Mystics and Mystical Currents, and I'll be linking that at the end. In it, what I talk about is that we need to be paying attention to ourselves as mystics. We need to see the other people around us as mystics. This isn't something that died off ancient years ago. This is something that, if it was ever true, it is as true now as it was before. So looking for mysticism in both ourselves and each other is something I think we need to be doing. What I've said is that we need to love the people but challenge the ideas. And there's a common thread with why I challenge ideas, whether that's Judeo-Christianity or whether it's vegan vegetarians. In both cases, it's any time that someone is looking at themselves as ethically or morally superior to others. So, speaking as a mystic, I think that there are two choices. We can either be superior or we can be God. But we cannot be both. There's no in-between ground. If we are not superior to each other and we're all one, then it's possible that our reality is that we're one with God, that we are God's creativity, as I've said, that that's a part of the same essence. But if we're superior to each other, then this reality in which we're separate bodies has to be true. So that's the price that you pay for seeing yourself as superior. In The Space Between Stories, I talked about us being in a liminal space, a doorway. A limen is a threshold. And so we're in this strange little in-between space, and a space where we're not really here and not there, kind of like the god Janus, who was the god of doorways, who looked both ways. And a book that I picked up recently that I am loving is The 10,000 Doors of January by Alex Harrow. And I will be doing an entire episode on that, I'm sure. But in it, it talks about these doorways into somewhere else. and ones that give this leap of being in an entirely different place. I think that that's the time and the space that we're in right now. We are in this doorway, and in this story, people have this sense of falling when they're there, when they're going from one world to another. There's a feeling of blackness, of being sucked down, and that you need that faith to keep on going and get to the other side. And that's what I feel like we need right now, is that faith that there is another side and that we're going to get there. And the other thing true in 10,000 Doors of January is that words make things happen. And so I think that we're in that same time. We need to have faith that there's that world that we want that's on the other side. But in order to have that faith, first we need to create that world. As long as we're afraid that there's nothing else out there, I don't think that world can happen. I think we're going to stay stuck in this doorway. And in order to bring that about, I think we need to employ our imaginations and our desires for what it is that we want to see. In this book, Lexicon by Max Berry, words also have power, but they only have destructive power. And in the 10,000 Doors, that's not true. That the words have power when they have meaning, when they can bring about something that's good, something that's right, and something that's true. I think that that's where we're at, because, as I've said, there's this frightening part of this idea that maybe we can make things happen. That you think, oh, does this mean that I'm going to make bad things happen? Or that if bad things happen, it's my own fault because I've made them. Maybe other people have made things happen to me. I don't believe that it works that way. I think that spirit, which is the communication between us and God, I think spirit is the choreographer, that spirit makes the coincidences, the synchronicities, as Charles Eisenstein would say. But I think it's up to us to make sense of them and to write the script, to figure out how could this end well? What's a way in which things could develop? Think like a novelist. Think like a sci-fi author, like someone who's solving a detective story. How can we make this come out well? And what's the shortest way to get from here to there? That's the script that I think we're writing. And extending that analogy, because perhaps the entire world is an analogy, when we're in our right mind, our right side of our mind, that's the feminine side related to the left hand. And that, I think, is spirit, is the part that is one with God, that is fully in touch with God. And then I think when we're using the left side of our brain connected to the right hand, the masculine side, that when we are seeing things correctly is in touch with everyone else. It's looking at the socio side of that and then the spiritual side of that. What I'm doing in my book, How to Dismantle an Empire, is giving us a common vocabulary, a common framework. At the end of each chapter, I have what I call a lexicon, a way that we can be meaning the same thing when we're using that same word, and also a way of understanding what the questions are and what the problems are, and understanding how money works, so that when we plug that solution in, we know what the tools are that we have to work with. But then we get to apply that any way we want to our place. And the way that I look at this, I have two different chapters. One is called World Without Ends. And so I'm looking at the world without borders, one without limits, without liminal spaces, one without thresholds, in which every different community, every family, every person is the center of the world, the center of the universe. And the way that I picture this is where they are honeycombed, where each group is surrounded on 6 different sides by the other ones that branch out. So there can never be anyone who's on a border saying, oh, yeah, I walk across the street and suddenly my money doesn't have the same value over there. That shouldn't be the case. Every time we look at any of these different groupings, we should be looking at them as being internested in each other. Look at the place where you are, the world in which you are the center, and look at your neighborhood of, say, 120 people, and then your hamlet of 1,400, and then maybe your village of 17,000, up to your commonwealth of 200,000. How would those look? What would you name them? What would they feel like? And what are the functions that you think make sense to do at any different of those levels? That's what I think we need to be thinking about, is what do you love? And how can you make things work in the way that will make you happy? I don't think we should just be looking at one kind of money to do everything. It just doesn't work that well. Having different kinds of digital currencies that have different functions. So think about the things that you want to encourage, the ways that you want to be joyful and happy and with other people who enjoy the same things, and to make the kind of world especially that you want for the next generation. How can you structure things to make that happen? How long it takes to get to that next world that our hearts know is possible, to again quote Charles Eisenstein, is entirely up to you. As long as we're afraid, as long as we don't really believe that it's possible, it won't happen. You need to write that world that you long for into existence in a way that is so real that you can taste it. For more on the power of words, this is When Words Die, Worlds Die, and also The Tonic Gnostic, which looks at Rudolf Steiner and also quotes from my poem, Mystical Currents, Current Mystics. Thank you for watching.